project came about, me searching and trying to see some of the war stories of failures and ups and downs, and not having any to kind of reference. Kyle and I figured we should just go out and try to talk to more experienced real estate investors, heads of companies that have gone through it. And the first person that we talked to was Bill, and Bill immediately told us we should talk to you. So you're our second guest, and there's no real format. I'm trying to selfishly gain experience from this and have insights. And I found myself over the last 4 or 5 years, as I've developed my practice of servicing real estate companies, and as an investor of buying and doing value add myself, I found myself actually benefiting from the little tips and tricks that I've heard over the years. So that's really kind of, for me, how this came about. And Kyle and I both listened really intently to the interviews that you kind of already done over the years. So, we know you ran companies, you didn't want to be a cheerleader, you wanted to be in the action. You're successful athlete and kind of like this team player. What we don't know are kind of like the nitty gritty of, let's say, your first deal or the first time that you found yourself, what we call our first bricks. It's what was your first opportunity and how did you navigate it?
Well, getting ready for this, I started to reflect on my real estate career. And one thing, I did start in banking, and that's where the whole thing about cheerleader, because they said at the bank we're cheerleaders, we're not players. And in my head, I said, I am not a fucking cheerleader. And so that really was something that then I got into real estate, and I really liked it. But what I found was, I think one of the guys asked me about my first job and what it was like. And this is more, me reflecting. So I started working for a shopping center company, Triley Shopping Centers. Now, Triley was a combination of Bramley and Trizac, and they formed a shopping center company. They had, I think, 12 to 15 shopping centers all across Canada, nice book of business. We had, our best asset was Yorkdale, which I officed out of. So here's how quickly your career can change. So there I'm hired into the corporate development group. The corporate development group is buying real estate. Okay, so we're out there in the market trying to buy real estate. So I'm evaluating. At this point, I've left school and I've have 2 engineering degrees and an MBA, and I'm running the numbers, and we're looking at buying a property in Vancouver for $150 million.
Is it again shopping centers?
Shopping center, yeah.
Okay.
So and so I'm out there running the numbers. Then one day, and the one deal that we did do is we bought a shopping center site in Ancaster, Ontario. So that was my first deal. And the interesting thing about an analyst perspective, I think I won't remember the numbers correctly, but let's say I thought the land was worth 10 and we were late to the party. We ended up paying like 20. And I kind of went, what are my analysis for? Because you just bid market and you bid to get the deal. That land eventually turned into be an okay center, but it never lived up to what we thought it would be. And we bought it at the peak. But the real interesting thing about that group was one day I come in. And so at the time I had, there was an SVP, 2 VPs, me, and a couple other people working in the department. I came in and everyone was being let go except for me and one other. But I'm only being kept as an assistant property manager. And I have a choice to either go to Yorkdale as an assistant property manager or Scarborough Town Center as an assistant property manager. I'm happy at this point. I'm scared because I'm married with one child and I got no backup plan. And because they're asking me assistant property manager, I'm not going, this is crazy. I'm thinking I'll take whatever I can get because this was my first real estate job and I liked what I was doing. So I end up, there's no way I can take the Scarborough because that's driving from Burlington all the way across the 401 to get to
Mm-hmm.
Scarborough. So I take the Yorkdale Shopping Center job. Meanwhile, our offices, our corporate offices were at Yorkdale. So what I didn't realize is the guy who was the property manager was going to treat me like an 18-year-old trainee.
Okay.
And he was going to make me do everything an assistant property manager would, not a 28-year-old office guy. So he made me learn to polish the floors with all the maintenance crew. He made me wear a white shirt with a blue bow tie and clean the food court. And meanwhile, my buddies at head office were dumping their Coke on the floor and say, you got to clean that up. And so what it made me understand, so the thing that, this is where you need outside views on this. So I came home one day and my wife said, you have to get out of there. You're miserable. You're not happy. You got to find something else. And I was trying to hang in there. But the guy treated me like crap. And I eventually, from there, got a job with Brookfield. But that's how my career started out. My first real estate job ended in a very challenging time. And yet I went somewhere. And where I went was somebody who knew me. And his comment to me at the time was, he had heard what had happened to me, and he had gone to work for Brookfield. And he said, you shouldn't be an assistant property manager. You should be running the property management division. Mm-hmm. And so he goes, I think very highly of you, and why don't you come work for us at Brookfield? So that was a big lesson. And that lesson ended up holding true the bulk of my career, which is if somebody cares about you, that's important. You need a boss that cares or people in an organization that care. And when they don't, things don't go as well. And so I was lucky because this guy left Triley to go to Brookfield and he immediately hired me. But that was a big lesson, and what I always tell people is that you need to take whatever job you can get, but you also still, you take a job for your boss more than for the company in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And was Yorkdale like the number one shopping center back then?
yeah, Yorkdale, it's fascinating to see as all the plans that we had so many different cool plans for Yorkdale. Like at one point we thought we should buy the Downsview Airport and build a tunnel because there it still was about parking. And we didn't foresee that rents would get so high you could build all that deck parking. But Yorkdale, yeah, we always thought it was a gem. It was, it has turned out to be something I couldn't imagine, and it's still probably the best center in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I think the results came up and
Yeah.
it's number one by like a lot.
Yeah, and the only thing is when I was with Triley, that was in around, that was some pretty difficult real estate times. And then the Triley that I knew that's kind of when you got into the late 80s, early 90s, where those assets all got split up and they were no longer part of the Edper group. They got all sold to OMERS and others. And so all those assets got sold off. So it didn't necessarily, the assets survived. The company didn't survive.
Did you learn anything special when you were doing like on the ground work at the Yorkdale Shopping Center?
Well, I guess the thing I've always learned that, property management and how we run assets is important. And getting to know the people that do that is important. The other thing that was a tradition, even with head office, so we were in an office tower connected to Yorkdale. So every time we got to walk the mall. And when you walk the mall, what we were told as management, if you see something wrong, fix it. You're the owner.
Yeah.
In addition, if you see garbage on the floor, pick it up. And that to me was a very good message. And I spent a week with a property manager at the Penn Center in St. Catharines. Great guy. Just taught me more about how a shopping center is a community, and how, it's even like people who walk down a main street and wave hello to everybody if they're a retailer. Same thing happens in a mall. Like when the doors are opening up, everybody. And it was a real community feeling in that. And that's something you want in a shopping center. You want a community feeling, right? But
And was there anything that they were doing back then to run a shopping center successfully? Was there anything they were doing back then that has been lost?
no, I'd actually say that what I learned about retail in a shopping center is counter to what I think good retail is. Because what happens in a good shopping center, at the time, there were 3 leasing groups that controlled a whole bunch of tenants. And the joke was that from a leasing perspective, you phone 3 groups and you get your mall leased. And the way you get your mall leased is you tell them that if you want in Yorkdale, you have to go in these 5 other malls. And so that to me is kind of the easy way to lease.
Mhm.
The better way to lease, and from a retail perspective, is to pound the pavement, to go around looking in the mall for good retailers and see if you can get them in. And that doesn't necessarily mean at the highest rent. That means the best retailer for the fit for the mall. And I've always been a believer it's not about the maximizing rent in a mall. It's getting the right mix and getting good retailers. And a lot of people don't necessarily agree with my philosophy, because we're supposed to be maximizing value of assets. But sometimes maximizing value isn't about the rent. It's about the tenant mix and how it feels. And I defended a lot of retailers. I remember one specifically. It was a really good breakfast place in a food court. We can get a better breakfast place. I go, yeah, but they've been here forever. They know people by name. Like, I like that feeling. Well, we want to get rid of them because they're not paying high enough rent. I didn't agree with that stuff. And I always thought it's kind of what feels right, not always to maximize value. And tenant mix, and same thing, even when you get into culture is about the right people. And it might not be the superstars. Like, and this even when you get into team sports. Team sports and good companies for me could be about individually they're average players, but collectively they're superstars,
Mhm.
just because they work well together. And that's the same thing in a company. I think it's the same thing as you put together a mall and how you put tenants together. You can make it a more interesting experience, and therefore people want to come to that mall.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's not a cookie cutter. You see a retailer that you haven't seen. You see a clothing store. You see a restaurant that you hadn't seen. You can get Starbucks anywhere, man.
It reminds me of a party. I used to throw parties,
Okay.
and, it started in university. I was throwing a lot of parties, and eventually I opened venues, and I would take a struggling venue and turn it around.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the most important part of the venue, which is throwing parties, but the most important part of the party is the people in the party.
Correct.
And putting that mix together changes everything. And so sometimes you tell one person, hey, she's coming to the party, so he comes along. And you tell her he's coming to the party, so she comes along. Both of them weren't coming in the initial phase, but now they're both coming because of the good news.
Yeah.
And I feel like shopping centers are kind of like this self-fulfilling prophecy. I have a friend who buys
Yeah.
distressed shopping centers, and we were talking about this, and I was kind of saying, well, you know, you could lease it for the level the shopping center is now. So kind of like, I don't know, like Rossi, Dollarama,
Okay.
kind of like low end, or you could try to go a little bit higher, should a bit up your your weight class. Because if you can get that retailer in, all of a sudden now you've elevated your game.
Yep.
And I'm saying this just off of instinct, but to me it sounds like if you go into a mall and you only have your institutional grade uh nationals that are everywhere,
Yep.
like the winners of the world, there's not much to kind of pull people in.
Well, also, what I'd like to do is to bring in a tenant who you get a percentage rent on. So therefore, both sides win. There's too many times that they just wanna throw somebody in at a rent, and that rent, they may or not be able to pay it. But if you get a good retailer and you say, "Okay, let's be part of your success." I mean, it's so weird sometimes when you go landlord-tenant, and it almost seem at odds. But if you can create more of a win-win where you get the tenant that wants to be there and doesn't mind the fact that, like, I like the idea if you take a chance on somebody. Is the person has one store, one coffee shop. You put them in your mall. Well, they're not paying the rent Starbucks is paying, but over time, you give them a chance. And then eventually, you'd like to think with base rent and percentage rent, they actually are paying more.
Yeah.
So you've got a more interest and you've got a very motivated tenant who then you might be able to say, you might be the next Starbucks. I don't know. But until you give them a chance, you kind of get hung up on just trying to fill the mall with the same old, like you said, they they usually got filled with nationals, and I found that boring as hell.
Yeah.
Found it boring as hell.
Have you ever seen a mall kinda go from a lower standing and go all the way up? Like, is there case studies of turning around a mall, or is it really kind of more the community around it and the demographics around it that make the mall?
Um, yeah, I think it's the demographics around that can make the mall. It's also the travel time. So that's why anything on the highways makes it easier to get into the malls where there's been a number of examples, like even Hazleton Lanes in Yorkville. That's in the middle of one of the best retail high-end district. It's never worked. I've been through it a number of times. It never seemed to work, and it was almost too much retail. And the other thing in that, you've got an enclosed mall really in a street-orientated place. So
Mhm.
I wanna walk Yorkville. Well, I wanna walk Yorkville on the street. I don't wanna be in a mall. And so what ended up happening there is in the mall just didn't work, where other places you go in the suburbs, you wanna be in the mall, like,
F Because there's a lack of other places to be?
yeah, and and it's also cold outside, and there's not as many coffee shops as there might be in Yorkville, right?
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, the thing that I got, thinking about was when you were talking about, people and, attracting the right people, and that was always something that, I looked at a good leader is somebody that people followed job-wise. So, I would observe different executives going into companies, and no one would come with them. And that to me was a little bit of a telltale sign that they didn't create that right party that you talked about,
Yeah.
because the right party goes, "Hey, we're having fun here. I'm bringing you here because it's fun. Why don't you let's bring a few of our friends." And, for me, that ended up happening. I ran into a lot of really good people when I was at Trizac. And over the years, they got reconnected in the industry. Like there was an old whole Trizac crew that reconnected in various places, and it was because people liked one another. And it's your party analogy exactly is that you then say that's a pretty good place to work. And by the way, I'm using that a little bit now in whatever I look for being on boards and being involved with companies. It
Mhm.
starts with a friend where the
Yeah.
friend says, "Hey, why don't you come and be on the board?" Oh, okay. Same thing as your party analogy. It's a pretty good logic to be following. If you like somebody and they go somewhere and they're gonna follow them, and by the way, if it goes bad, they're gonna tell you really early,
Yeah.
right? Other places you go, you say, "Well, you're on your own," and I would say I learned that's some of the things I've learned too, is that after my experience with, Tri-Lee, I went to a couple places where I didn't get the heads up, and then it's pretty lonely when there's no one there to help you.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Well, speaking of people, one of the struggles I have is with recruitment.
Yep.
Um, you get the CVs, or everything on paper is perfect, and they kind of have all the experience that you need for where you're at and your company's at. But then what I find the struggle is, I need kind of like the grit of like real world, because we're still out in the eat what you kill environment. And so I've had a lot of struggles with recruitment, where now it's almost like I want to meet the person and not be influenced by whatever the CV says, because sometimes that, big shiny experience they have, or years of wherever and whatever they did, influences it, like tints my
Yep.
view on them.
Yep.
Um, so I was curious if over the years you've gained any tricks or insights on how to make good recruitment choices.
Um, I, well, some of it is from friends who refer.
Yeah.
That's
Those are the best, right?
yeah, those are the best. And then I'd have to say, and we've talked about it here today, athletes, particularly team athletes versus individual athletes. A tennis player is a lot different than a football player, a lot different than a rugby player.
Yeah.
I had a lot of success with athletes and being able to relate to them. And it's it's people who want to they want to get along, like they want to be liked, and versus lone wolves. Like I have a hard time with lone wolves. So it was team players that you could see there was a bit of a history of being an athlete or being on a team. Uh, That was where I got some of my greatest successes. But I would also say that over the years, you're right. The resume can be deceiving,
Yeah.
and then even some of the stuff that was being done later in my career was tests, like for an analyst, 10 questions,
Yeah.
and there's times these days that even though somebody's got an MBA or some sort of finance degree, they don't know numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens. It's still it blows me away because we interviewed one person one time, and she was a friend of a daughter of a friend, and they said, "Well, she didn't. Yeah, she got 3 out of 10." I said, "Well, what do you mean? It's got to be hard." They said, "No, most people get 8 or 9." And I went, "Well, maybe the school didn't do a good job there, and they're just cranking out people." But yeah, there's a little bit more every once in a while I find to dig into. But when I think of uh, some of my best hires, it was your gut. It was, but there were usually athletes involved as well, or in the case of a couple women I hired, they were just well known in the industry to be uh, fellas.
Mhm.
Like they would get along with everybody. They got along with guys very easily, and so it was that ability to get along. And there's a lot of really smart real estate people. They're too smart, and the what I've learned about those people, you can still have them, but they got to be in a small group, and they tend to be deal people,
Mhm.
and they end up needing just a small group of super smart people to put them out into the bigger company. They can piss people off, and you've got to be careful with that. So a lot of times deal people need to be with deal people, and they need to be with really smart people, and you got to keep them. And by the way, deal people usually can't run a company. Is
Why?
that I have this thing about the reason you run a company, or one of the key things you do as a leader. You do all the bad stuff.
Yeah, you're like a firefighter.
You Everything's bad, you take. Everything that's good, you give away. So when there's a deal going on, you don't stick your nose into the deal. You let your deal person do it. If the deal starts to go sideways and they ask you to help, that's one thing. To step in, and suddenly what people are going to do, and I would do it myself. If you told me this is my job and then suddenly you took it away, I'd say the next time is, well, you go do this. So I learned that taking all the bad stuff was how you manage the company. You Anything that was bad, And the worse it was, the more you had to take it on. And then I watched other leaders go, "Oh, I'll take this. I'll take that." And they were negotiating deals. Well, that's negotiating deals in some cases what everyone in real estate wants to do. So I stayed away from it. I said, "Okay, I'm gonna have deal people. They're gonna make," and I had a guy phone me up one time. He was a broker in, Calgary. And he phoned me and he said, "I'm dealing with your deal guy here in Calgary, and he doesn't wanna pay what it's gonna take to get the deal." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" He goes, "Well, I think you should talk to him." I said, "You realize how wrong this is. So if I do this, the next time there's a deal, you're just gonna phone me. So I hire people to do deals. I am not going to jump into this. I'm going to leave it to him to solve, and you gotta deal with him. Because otherwise, then I'm not running an organization, I'm doing all the deals, and I don't want that. That's not how you run a company. You let people go do their deals. And, it was funny because there, there's a lot of times people think that if you're the president or the CEO, you should be the one making decisions. But what I learned is you have to share those decisions. If you start making them all yourself, you can't run a big company. You have to have a great deal of trust, and I really believe in that. You hire good people. It's like, Jim Collins, get the right people on the bus, it'll work. Yeah, big time.
I really, can relate with the, like, not getting involved. Um, I wonder though if it's, like, different stages of companies in the sense that, like, we're still really small, we're in the, like, mid-20s,
Yep.
and a lot of, enthusiasm on my team. I'm very
Yep,
enthusiastic as
yep,
well, and, not a ton of experience. So sometimes I can see things not get done if I don't involve myself and push them over to the finish line.
yep,
And what I'm scared about is when things don't get escalated.
yep,
Like if someone's supposed to take care of uh, a negotiation
yep,
and he's kind of like letting it die on the vine, um, that's really what gets me.
yep.
So
Well, the thing that I'll talk about is, earlier in your career is different than later. So, yeah, through some of my, YPO work, I learned that different people have different strengths, and you become either you're a magician, a lover, a warrior, sovereign. There's different, and you can have all these attributes, but some of them are your strong suit. So what I learned about myself earlier on, I was a natural warrior, which is go get it done,
yeah,
with a little bit of sovereign going on, like the king. As I got better at it, the warrior kind of went away, but he was still there. And so it meant every once in a while I would use the warrior to get stuff done. But a lot of times I was trying to be the sovereign to allow it all to happen. And I think, companies, when you're younger, you've got to probably use warrior more.
yeah,
As you develop out people, you start to get into sovereign and you understand how, because if you don't get at a warrior,
yeah. You
it's
get
pretty hard to
tired.
become king.
Yeah, but you get tired too.
Well, yeah, yeah. And so the thing that I learned is that, and it took a while. It took a while to actually understand to just let things happen. And then also, when it comes to people, you need to realize that, different people need different levels of coaching in their careers and as a person. Like some people, you hire them, you go, let them go,
Hmm.
stay out of their way. They're just perfect. Other people that it might be earlier on might need a lot of coaching. And so your coaching, graph changes with different people over time, and you can't coach everybody the same way.
Hmm.
So you've got to look at somebody and go, okay, I need to jump in there. Other person, you don't. And then another thing with people, and I got this, this happened to me many, many times. Sometimes too much information or too strategic of information is not good for every employee.
Hmm.
Some are more like soldiers and only need to what tasks to do, and they love being soldiers and they love to figuring out how to fit in. If you tell them the strategy, they can't be a soldier because they get confused by it. So there's also that as it relates to people, you have to also know who you can share strategic information with and who you can't,
Mhm.
because not everyone is wired that way. They'll get all confused because in some cases you need your soldiers or your what we also refer to them as rowers. Rowers need to just keep rowing. And you'll end up having people in your organization that are good at tasks, they'll get it done. And then there's other people you need to send on missions to go find things. So I think the different analogies was there were uh, scuba divers, whitewater rafter, and rowers.
Okay.
So the scuba divers found it. They couldn't necessarily take it through the rapids. And then when it got through the rapids, the guys in the rapids couldn't necessarily do the rowing. So so we would have a lot of scuba divers go and find deals or find things. And then they would give it to a whitewater rafter and take it maybe from the start of an idea to a full-on idea. Then it got to be a full-on idea. It went to the rowers. And so there's a lot of things as you develop out your company, even when we were talking, where you say, if you suddenly had a whole bunch of assets that you owned
Mhm.
and they need to be babysat or looked at, that's not the same person who found that deal.
No, no, not
No, that's somebody who goes, oh, I went to see every tenant and had a cup of tea with them. And now I understand what's wrong with the building.
yeah.
And it's finding people like that. And that's where, real estate all it takes all kinds of different people to run.
Yeah, yeah,
And
totally. Yeah, that's interesting, the scuba diving thing. I guess I sometimes have that where I'm talking macro strategy with
yeah.
someone, and then you can tell, yeah, they get it, but now they're thinking about something that's too far removed from the actual mission at hand.
Yeah.
So that's what you mean by keeping everyone kind of
Well,
aligned.
it's knowing the difference. And then what you're going to get into as well is, and I struggle. I think I spend a lot of time, and a lot of people spend a lot of time on vision statements and mission statements. And, I would say that I came to my own conclusion, and it was from a guy, Michael Porter. So I was at a conference I think it was in Chicago, where Porter's speaking about strategy. And it was the first time that somebody said something that just resonated with me. And he goes, here's the way it works. And again, this is Porter, and this is what I adopted. Your vision, mission, all that is what are you going to do? And it all has to be measurable. So what we ended up saying, for me, it got to be, we're going to grow at 500 million a year, and we're going to deliver 6 to 8% returns. That was my mission. That was my vision. It wasn't some airy fairy statement. It was this. And if we achieved it, we achieved it. And I could look at everyone and say, we achieved it. So we had that, and that was kind of your year to year thing. And then we stole from Jim Collins a BHAG. So a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? So we always had a BHAG, and the BHAG is 5 to 10 years out. And then the last piece of it is your guiding principles of how you operate, which are your core values. And your core values are probably the thing you need to spend your most time on because it's about your culture. And those things just have to resonate with people. And that then tells you if you're going about your day in the right manner.
Mm,
Because if kindness is in your core values, or different things are in your core values, and you're not being kind, or you're not being thoughtful, or you're not being honest, these are things this is why you don't hire somebody. The other things are more the measurables, because to me, you had to measure it. Because in being an athlete, I couldn't understand that somebody goes, we want to be the greatest service orientated company in the world.
mhm.
How do I know when we got there? What's the best mean? So if I put numbers to it, it was, in sports, we want to score 6 goals every game. We want to win this many games in a season. We want to have so many goal scorers, whatever. I found all that easier to manage, think about, and communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I went with it, because all the other stuff just got to be too airy-fairy for me. And like I said, between Porter and Collins, I got some things that I could use for myself. But I did spend, with different companies, hours at retreats crafting a mission and vision statement, and then put it up on the wall and walk to my office and go, what did we say there? What was it? What was our, I can't remember. What word did we decide on Paramount? And so that's why, even Nike, just do it. There's a few things slogan wise that I like, but the more that you could measure it, the more I knew we were there. And that also got me with different people wanting to do different things in the company, right? Yeah, I'd still go, you need to know your stats.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a really good leasing person. Okay, so then start walking around with your stats. How many square feet did you lease? At average, what rate? And then even for me personally, so at one point, I would be able to say, I grew a company from 800 million to 17 billion and later 27. During that time, we delivered 10% return. Aren't I done? Like, isn't somebody going to go, well, that was pretty good?
Yeah.
And then the other one with how good you are, and this actually is a little bit along the lines of what you touched on about people. I used to do a lot of research about what different people in the industry were saying about my people or about somebody I wanted to hire. Same thing. Like, you can go check somebody out pretty easily. And that was always enlightening. That's where you kind of, and I would do it in some cases, not because I was thinking of getting rid of somebody, but I would just say, well, how are my leasing people with you? Like, and a big leasing broker, and you'd say, that's just between us. Like, I'm just trying to figure out, I'm not looking to fire, hire, do anything here. I just want to get a sense of how could we be better? And, 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, I got an honest answer. Other times I didn't. But I found that very valuable, because the other thing you get into there is that if your people are good, people should want to steal them.
Yeah.
So they should be on people's radar screen. Like, and that was another thing that I got from a headhunter. So the search firm one time said to me, uh, you want to be recruited all the time. So why? He goes, well, if you're good, then they're going to want you.
Mm-hmm.
So if the phone's not ringing, that's where you might have a problem. And I went, and so I was always sticking my nose into potential jobs. I wanted to be relevant, but also it was a test. Same thing in your own employees, whether it's you or your own employee. Same thing. If they're being recruited, this is where you might want to step up. You might want to say, I don't want to lose you, because somebody else sees they have tons of value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So I guess maybe I'd like to kind of pitch you, what we're doing, what my company does, and you can kind of like tell me if that makes sense to you, because I also share the kind of mission statement, vision. Like, it's a lot of words to
Yeah.
me. The very concrete thing is, um, I like experiences, and from a very young age up until now, I've made all my money by creating and delivering experiences to people. And I've discovered that people are willing to pay a lot of money to feel good.
Yep.
And that's how I started, by selling things online. I was selling women's hoodies on eBay,
Okay.
and my listings would get higher bids and make more money because the listing was pretty and it had, like, I guess, more of a decorum than the other listings.
Hmm.
When I was 17, 18, all of a sudden it was going out, meeting girls, and I transferred that to organizing events.
Okay.
There's a website called Facebook that had just come out at the time.
Yeah.
And I was putting Facebook events with flyers and descriptions. And the description and the flyer, I guess, created emotion to people. And they came and the party became what it was. And one successful party translates to another one, right? As long as the first one is okay, there's momentum. Kind of like a team going into playoffs. Like you got to keep it rolling. And essentially, I would go into a venue and see potential, but it wasn't redecorating. It was just thinking, okay, it's going to be this DJ, this photographer. This is the mix, and we're going to see if it rises. We've always charged on a performance base. So kind of like, minimal fees or market relevant fees and upside. And over time, venue owners reached out to us, and we started taking equity stakes to turn around venues. And then over time, it was property owners, like mixed use assets, would reach out and say, hey, come and rent this space. And eventually, the story is a really elderly real estate investor came up to me and said, hey, you did a restaurant and an asset that I passed on, and I live in Florida now, and I keep hearing from my grandkids that there's a 1 hour lineup outside this venue. And this 200,000 square foot asset was largely unleased. It's next to Concordia. It's called Faubourg Sainte-Catherine. And he goes, you don't know this, but I know this. There's 5 other restaurants coming next to you. Concordia, the university, is renting the basements. The person who bought it paid 16. Where a year and a half later, it's worth at least 30 more, right? From vacant to being largely leased. And then he looks at me, he goes, do you make a lot of money in your restaurant? And then I gotta go, well, I'm not the celebrity chef. I'm not closing it. I'm not exactly, I come up with the concept and I run it, but there's a lot of other moving parts. And then so his last thing was, well, if ever you wonder who's making money off of your work, it's the real estate owner. And so that was like the big moment, like 7 years ago. And since then, I've kind of placed myself on the ownership side of helping owners that have assets that are struggling. And during COVID, for the first time in a long time, it was multifamily developers who, because of COVID, nobody wanted to rent downtown Montreal. Right? They wanted to be by a cottage outside of the city. So it started with multifamily. And then myself, I had my first real estate deal, which was a multifamily property right near downtown Montreal, near Concordia. So I've done it, on a lot of multifamily assets, and then also on some mixed use. I did the project Plaza Marie with Ivanhoe. So basically, I would say that as a company, we're good at creating value through what an outsider would say is marketing. But as an insider, what I would say is through great property management, great programming. And then the best programming is the one that starts before you get to the property, right? That entices you to come along. That's the marketing element. So to a lot of people, I get the kind of like, oh, you're the bar guy, you're the nightlife guy, you're the marketing guy. But we do actually do way more marketing than a traditional real estate owner. And I find it to be so much more valuable than pure CapEx. Like the deal I'm doing in DC. We're not spending, we're spending marketing dollars. We're spending a little bit of FF&E, furniture and some things. But the building is largely exactly the same as it was when we started 2 years ago, except the rents are up, the occupancy is up. And how did we change that? Well, it's just like, it's a hockey team. Everyone on that team thought of themselves as like, we're not able to be filled up. We're not good. So we're going to lower the rents. We're going to lower the service. We're going to try to cut. We came in and we kind of went, no, what are our disadvantages? Our disadvantages are our units are too big. We don't have a pool. And we kind of go, okay, well, our units are big. So we're great for a discerning professional. We didn't want noisy neighbors. So there's no pool parties. Instead of being a huge building with great amenities, but 40, 50 neighbors per floor, you only have 14 neighbors per floor. So it's more boutique,
Yep.
it's more exclusive. And so it's like reframing, repositioning the asset. And the major change that occurs is like, paint, signage, furniture, and then customer service.
Yep.
So oftentimes we end up cutting on staff, on site personnel, and just keeping really hospitality oriented staff, and then supplementing them with remote admins.
Hmm.
And this is from doing a lot of work in the COVID era.
Yep.
We found that instead of having someone doing administrative work on site in the US, paying agency fees and a big payroll, you can have excellent admins helping that person remotely from, say, Brazil or Colombia. And so you can save on OpEx there. And then on site, the person that you have there, you kind of tell them like, listen, you have an assistant helping you, and we give, way higher incentives like leasing bonuses and commissions based off of actual value.
Okay.
And that's like pretty much the same playbook across every project. So I would say half the business is doing this turnaround, property asset management work for third parties, for owners that, let's say, don't have the intensity of the focus that we would.
Yep.
And then doing the exact same thing for ourselves with assets that we buy. Obviously, smaller deal size,
Yeah.
but it's the same work, it's the same thing, at a different scale.
Well, when you're talking this way, first I find that real estate executives or institutional real estate, when they get in trouble with an asset, they throw capital at it, as you said. So
Yeah.
we're gonna build it. If we build it, they will come, which I've never agreed with. So the stuff that you're touching on, pools in apartment buildings, always sold the apartment building, but never were used.
Yeah.
So whether you need it or not. So your model is something I totally agree with. The your challenge is getting the people that want to do that. And we had one of my teams one time went down to the US and they said they came back with some great ideas. And I don't know if we ever were able to pick up on this, but they said, we need property managers. And where you're going to find property managers is go to the perfume counters of the different department stores and hire a woman who sells perfume, because she's going to know what service is and she's going to know how to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're hiring people like that and you get them to be professionals, it is way above what most apartment owners do, which is the old couple model, right? The husband would be the handyman who would walk around and he might lease space in his pants half down his butt. And that was the guy leasing space because it was really easy to lease. His wife did the books. That was the typical model. What you're doing is what I like, is hire some very aggressive marketing type person who knows how to sell. You've got to have all the back office to make it all look good, and asset wise too. Stick with doing the nicer things. You don't need. I don't want to put capital into a building, and if you can actually do that without adding amenities, then that's an amazing thing. And by the way, it's something that one thing that has always happened in property management, it's sometimes people have always looked down their nose at it because it's dealing with, the tenant. But really, even going back to, this is 30 years ago, we always wanted to elevate the whole property thing in property management.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we got to call them something else,
Mm-hmm.
a concierge or whatever. But if you can do that and start attracting people that really care, and then their compensation is tied to how well leased buildings are. And then, by the way, I remember this is a long time ago because a friend of mine's daughter was doing these types of turnarounds in the U.S. because they could have empty apartment buildings. Now, we don't have many empty apartment buildings in Canada, but the whole idea was send in a team with a plan. And the plan wasn't just with bags of money to fix it. It was make it easier to lease. As you say, if people these days are renting by a website or something, make that easier. So a lot of the stuff you're talking about is things that I wish there was more, not only in service of apartment buildings, but service of office buildings, all that. Like there's so much room to improve our property management service levels
Yeah.
in Canada. Just huge. It's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's also something I've talked to people about is whether somebody shouldn't be going out looking to buy a bunch of property managers because I think we noticed recently the case decided to outsource all their property management to JLL.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
But then JLL pretty much just hired everyone that was working at the case.
Correct. Doesn't make any sense. But also, I think the fundamental question that has always been posed to me is, as a landlord, like what is your touch point with a tenant? And to me, it's important that we still have a touch point. And I find it odd that somebody wants to allow another intermediary in between them and their tenant. We've already allowed a ton of it. Like even when you look at the office space, the tenant doesn't come right to the landlord to get the rent. They hire a broker. They don't use the design group that the landlord has. They hire their own designer.
Mm-hmm.
They get all their like we as landlords have allowed this to happen over a long time. But the last one is that we don't want to do the property management because I don't get it. Do we not want any contact with the tenant at all? And do we just want to be lords? Like, is that's the weird thing, it's called landlords, and sometimes we act like lords. And really, we should be on the same page. We should be working together. We should be trying to figure out what they want. And, that to me is something that's missed a bit, is that, in some cases in the office market, we don't need to be nice to the tenant until it's 2 years before his renewal.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be really nice to him. So there's a bunch of things that if you could just make it more making that tenant feel like they're important, I think it's a huge advantage for an asset. It's very important.
It's kind of like if you were to buy an iPhone and then you buy it and it's great. And then the company tells you, oh yeah, no, wait, to get it serviced, you need to go to this other random company.
Yeah.
And when you call them, they don't answer. And you're kind of like, oh, okay, I have this great apartment, but nobody's calling me back.
Yep. Yeah. And that to me is what, fundamentally we would say that these, what other contact are you going to have with a tenant if you aren't the property manager? I don't know how you do it any other way. Like even there was so many different stories that happened over the years. Like one that I'm reminded of is that somebody came in and took over the management of an asset, and there was a security guard, and the security guard gave out popcorn to all the different tenants. And they were doing cost-cutting matters, so they fire the security guard who was giving out popcorn. Meanwhile, that's why they were there. Like, they love the guy. And that, to me, it's finding the staff that really care that way. Because, in some cases, in the real estate hierarchy, property management has been the lower one, and I would love to see it elevated. I would love to see it be more highly regarded and people pay more attention to it.
Yeah. Well, it's because, one, it's complicated. It doesn't seem like it adds a lot of value. Because once the lease is signed, your property is fully valued. Then you just got to manage the lease. It's kind of like an afterthought.
Yeah, well, and it's different. This is where the different levels of real estate were always more interesting, is that in office and industrial, you had 10-year leases, so you're only nice to them when they renew. But when you get into apartments, it needs to be a little more frequent because it's usually a monthly or annual rent.
Yeah.
And then the one that you'll learn the most from is the hotel business because it's a daily rent.
Yeah.
And that to me is where you want more of the hotel experience in the other asset classes, even though it's not a daily rent.
Yeah, because technically, you don't need to put that much effort into it. But another thing is, like, the bar is so low.
Oh God, yeah.
That's, like, even, like, internally, sometimes I look back at the levels of marketing we had to put together just to keep at one point, I had 7 bars. And so to keep 7 bars active and full, let's say a minimum is 3 nights a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So you have 21 events a week. And some of them you have a promotional video before, you have a video after, you have a photographer. Like, it's like a full-on event production
Wow.
company. And I think about what we were doing before, and now I look at what we're doing now, and I know it's great compared to real estate, but you kinda, like, level down to the bar set by the market.
Yes.
And, I'd like to see a change, and I think it would be beneficial that, you know, owners are thinking about it that way. 'Cause my biggest struggle is trying to displace the incumbent.
Yeah.
And so the incumbent is a massive property manager called Greystar.
Yeah.
They manage
Oh yeah, yeah.
1,000,000 units.
Yes.
So in property management, asset management, you're not taking traditionally, you're not taking an upside. You're charging very, very minimal fees.
Yep.
And then there's maybe, like, hidden ancillary fees, like you get a cut off of
Yep.
I don't know what, but it's like a super low margin business. And so to kind of make it, they go and they get a lot of volume, right?
Mhm.
1,000,000 units is
Yeah, it's
mind-boggling.
crazy, yeah.
Um, and so the comment that comes back is kind of, well, it looks good for our lender. We're going with Greystar. It's You need to be so much better than the incumbent because then why bother with the risk of switching?
Yeah.
And that's really where I find the struggle is there are, I'm reading between the lines, but what I'm hearing is I'm not gonna lose my job for staying with Greystar,
Yes.
but I might be in trouble for trying you and it not being like the greatest home run.
Yeah, and the thing that you're talking about, I'll make there's a generalization that it is finding the persons that want that change. Um, and and then, by the way, in the real estate industry, I haven't found as many risk takers as there used to be.
Okay.
It's become very institutional.
Yeah.
And so therefore, the things that I used to see, I don't see as much anymore, where somebody says, "Oh, this guy could be the next Greystar." Or maybe I need a little competition against Greystar. So, and that's where it's an interesting idea for you to put forward. In that, we had a client one time that decided they were going to invest billions and billions of dollars, but they started out with 5 advisors. They wanted a horse. They wanted a jump ball. Like they wanted this to work. Then later they went to 3. You don't know how much that made me be on my toes. What are the other 2 competitors doing? And so Greystar needs a challenger, but they also need whoever is that manager. They need a lens into a world that goes, maybe Greystar's not that great. Maybe instead of just having 1 supplier, I should have 5 and test them and tell them, for example, you're going to get so many properties. In a year, we'll reevaluate. But I want to, and I want to be able to, and then what I get to do as the owner, I go, you see what JP did for me?
Mhm.
Do you see what Greystar did? Why don't we get these and work together and make them become a virtue? Because they're doing it for me. So can I do a bunch of stuff that makes it better for me by having competition. I know it's simple if I don't, but I looked at it and went, I thought our client was brilliant because I'm going to do a presentation. I'm thinking, I put together a good presentation. I wonder what the other group's doing. It made me sharper. And I think having that is important. Having a little pool of them and challenge one another.
Yeah.
Great. And it gives you a different lens on, say, well, give me a shot and compare.
Yeah.
What do you got to lose?
Yeah. I'm more interested in doing 20 turnarounds. So obviously there's fees, but then our thing is capturing a portion of the upside,
Correct.
right? And so I'm more interested in really strong focus and kind of being like a SWAT team coming in, taking it where it was here and bringing it all the way up.
You're likely more dealing with private capital than institutional capital to do that, though.
Probably, probably. But I mean, the way I see it is like a large owner, whether institutional or private, at one point has so many projects going on. He has his asset
Yeah.
managers. And so the asset manager, let's say, is taking care of 25 deals, might have one that went sideways.
Yeah.
That's the one that if they have someone to call, like that.
Yeah, but here's something that you probably should be thinking about in, should you be raising capital to go do this with this story and say, okay, um, try, try and find turnaround assets where you develop a fund that you're going to raise a couple $100 million to go buy these things and do it for somebody who sees value in it. Because then you've got everything you need. It's just plug and play at that point, right? And so if you're able to say, okay, yeah, I'll make the numbers up. You're going to raise $100 million. You got to put 5 in yourself, or your company's got to put 5 in, and then you got a fund to go buy a whole bunch of buildings with. And then you offer them up, some sort of, there's a promote in there. Because what you're talking about is a story, but also it allows you then to, even with a Greystar, would you be able to invest in their assets under a certain structure to be able to say, we will do that? Does that make sense? I don't know. Like there's a lot of people that want to do it this way because then everyone's aligned, right? You're saying, okay, well, I'm going to buy into your asset.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if they're not selling it and it's a turnaround, then you still might have to get out on an appraisal basis. But I've always liked alignment. That's one thing I've always liked, is that if whoever the manager is, if they win and the landlord wins, why not? And it is being somewhat like the Blackstones get away with this all the time. So small guys should be able to get away with it, but it's finding the capital that's willing to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I recently looked at a property right next door to the one that completing the turnaround. And I kind of touched a little bit into the whole capital raising world, and I got some interesting meetings through Bill.
Yeah.
With huge private equity real estate firms, and I kind of was like, okay, this is a career in itself,
Yes.
and I'm not against it, and I think probably the road leads there. But I was kind of more like, well, if it's, and I know it's easier to raise on a deal by deal basis than on a fund to then
Yeah.
find deals.
Yeah.
And I was like, to me, this is extremely juicy. But if the sentiment of the world shifts like it currently is in the US, especially with the orange tornado, I was kind of going, well, I'm not sure if this is the path where I get to doing more work quickly. I feel like if there are owners who have a problem right now and want to fix it, I probably get more reps in finding those owners right now, and
Yeah.
then over time progress to the whole, raising capital and
Yeah.
and sourcing your work through the turnarounds you find.
Yeah. Likely that is the right step. It's how many deals do you need to have done and turned around to say then you have a track record on individual deals.
Yeah.
So, yes, I would agree that being able to show a track record of X number of deals turned around when you go to put together a pitch deck, then you can say, well, here's 8 properties, bought them for this, sold them for this, made people money. So now I've got a track record. Instead of doing one-off deals, I want to go big. And then you get into the same or a different type of decision. Do you want to be big or not? Because after a while you go, well, now I need to hire a whole bunch of people, and it's a different management thing. I mean, I found that when you managed a company that was 800 million in AUM was different than a 2 billion, was different than a 5 billion, was different than a 10 billion, was different than 17 billion. And not everyone can do that. It was something that I was comfortable doing, but I'll tell you that the differences were dramatic, and you had to get comfortable at 17 billion or bigger. Is that stuff's not getting done the way you want to get it done.
It's slower.
It's just your message doesn't get through. Like as a leader, my message didn't get through to some of the employees. Right? It was it gets lost because now you're dealing with bureaucracy, and all of a sudden you went. I thought I was driving a racing car, and now I'm on a bus.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be a bus driver, and that is something for anyone who runs companies. What they need to think about, because I've run across people that like to get them going and then sell them and then start over again. And there's other ones who want to go and get bigger, or they get to a certain size and they say, I'm no longer running the company. Somebody else is, because they have the skills to do so. Right. That becomes a different story. And all of this is for anyone to think about. I mean, when we're talking here, I had a friend who was a really good deal guy, but as we got bigger, it wasn't the right place for him.
Why?
It got big.
Okay, it's too big.
It just
He needs to find bigger deals. He couldn't source bigger.
No, he was better at the small deal, and not having to deal with the bureaucracy and the governance and all this stuff. Like, let's go and get this and let's buy it, right? And so he was way better on his own. But because as times got bigger for me, I just noticed that sometimes even executive wise, it happened. I would have executives that were reporting right into me, and I'm going, okay, who's taking some of these roles, or who could take my role? Sometimes it was somebody at a lower level that you thought would rise. I mean, people get to a thing that they get to what they're good at and comfortable with, and sometimes they can't. They're done. And there's other times it's like, well, they need something more, and sometimes it's they need something more and it's not here because they don't have it. But I've seen lots of examples where people fit in your organization at a time, and then they don't later on. And same thing with leadership. Running a smaller company is way different than running a big company. And yeah, I was able to do it, but it could be frustrating at times because you wanted to make some shit happen, and suddenly it's like, well, you got to check with so and so, you got to check with so and so, and that's not fun.
Yeah. Already at my only qualm with real estate is that I find that it's slow. I find that if you don't have multiple projects going on at different stages, you kind of like you're waiting around a lot. So that's one thing that to me is like we were talking about the ethos or the values.
Yeah.
I feel like athlete, like competitive spirit, getting stuff done for sure. And then for me, I started in consulting. I started at KPMG.
Yeah.
And granted, it was a different time than now. Like there was way less sensitivity in the workplace in terms of like my first week at the job. if anyone was like that in the workplace nowadays, I think, like, you know, they'd be in trouble. But in my first week at the job was like it's like a cold shower. The guy just looked at me, he was like, "Get your shit on time, you know,
Yep.
take notes. Don't ask me a question if you're not ready. Like, do your research, and if I tell you another time, you're gone." And that was, like, the first week, and I was just like, "Whoa."
Wow.
But it was a great formative experience, and now, you know, I'm kind of, like, trying to reenact in a different way in today's world, but I'm trying to, like, give a platform where people are gonna be able to perform like that, where it's, like, getting things done,
Yep.
and short of hiring people that have worked in private equity or an accounting, background where there's a law background, where there's a little bit more rigor,
Yep.
I've had trouble hiring from real estate firms because it's slower and it's not the same level of accountability.
Yep.
So you were saying at the size, the bigger it is, the more bureaucratic it gets? Then my question is, like, how come the Blackstone stays super efficient and
Well,
nimble?
I have a theory on that. So it goes to an expression. It's not your job's not to motivate people, it's to hire motivated people. So I look at Blackstone and they go after people that are hungry and they reward them. So to me, and I'll contrast your experience with mine, which was I was the type of guy that would come into my boss's office and say, "I'm not busy, give me something to do."
Yeah.
Other people in corporate sit at their desk
Yeah.
and pretend to work.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was I'm not here to pretend. And if I'm done, I'm going home. Right. And that was another that was a weird lesson I learned. So I went to Trizec and I was working for this guy, and he was a great leader for me. And one thing he did for me, he said, "I want you to get a personality profile test done for you." And he goes, "Oh, well, the company's going to pay for it." Because I don't want to see it. I don't want to read it. It's not. It's for you. So he gave me this, full on test. Oh, I forget, half day of questions. And I met with the consultant afterwards. And this is how stupid consultants can be, because the consultant said, "You're politically naive. You need to, you're not sensitive to what's going on in the company." And he goes, "I got an idea for you that I think this would be very valuable for you to do." He goes, "Be at work one afternoon and watch your boss, make sure your boss leaves. Come back in early in the morning with the same suit on and pretend that you stayed all night." And I looked at him, and I'm pretty young at this point. I said, "That's stupid. Like, why would anyone do that?" He goes, "Well, that's maybe being politically correct." And I went, "I don't want to play that way." And this is the whole thing for me. I always dared to be different. I like to be my own person. And I think when you talked about the Blackstones and different companies, it was trying to find somebody with a bit of a fire who are motivated to make money. Like, I think Blackstone is, it's not a sweatshop, but they want to reward people. And they make it well known that they pay well. But my experience with them is that they seem to hire some pretty down to earth people. It's not all New Yorkers there. It's people with decent backgrounds. And even you get into, I know the Brookfield shop better. Brookfield just had a lot of smart people that worked hard. Like, and they weren't, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't sit there and go, they were amazing people, but it was a great culture, but they got rewarded and they knew how they were rewarded. And the thing is that if you set the right comp structure, I think you start attracting those people. Some of the issue you have is that in Canada, a lot of that real estate industry and real estate people aren't motivated. They get a salary, they get a bonus, and there's not, the promote in a deal. And the more you find people that are looking for that, because this was even we discussed, one of the things that we talked about, and this is maybe what we were talking a little bit earlier. The way I motivated people when we got big was to say, okay, you have a bunch of options here. So we had 4 asset classes: office, retail, multi-res, industrial, right? So we had the 4 food groups. We had all these different markets. And so what I would and here's how the thing I would say, we have a shop that also has small, mid-sized, large assets. So your potential here is that you can learn on small assets. You actually get to make decisions on small assets. If you went to a big company, they only have big buildings. You don't make any decisions on the assets. There's a team of people. Your growth here is that you're going to be able to go into 4 different asset classes if you want. Like if you're studying multi-res and you want to go into industrial, we have a big industrial group. You might have to move from being in Toronto to Mississauga. We also have different markets. You want to go to Ottawa, you can go to Ottawa, you can go to Montreal. So we could move people around. So it gave people a different career path that then said, hey, there's a lot going on here. And one of the biggest thing I said, though, was about the size of the assets. And one thing I noticed with the big companies, and because I did work for, Trizac, Brookfield, we didn't have a small asset you could really dig your teeth into. Or if we did, we kind of took them and put them in a subgroup and we were selling them off. And I saw some of the best talent in those subgroups dealing with the small assets. Because when you're dealing with a big asset, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so what, to me, a lot of this stuff was there's a way to create excitement in any company. You've got to have the right story. But I found it easier with the company I was with because we had, we might have a $10 million asset. Other companies, the smallest asset they had was 200 million.
Yeah.
So
Can't do anything.
can't do anything. And that's where even you get to dig your teeth into, like, this is where apartments were probably one of the more interesting assets from that standpoint. Because, $40 million apartment, $60 million apartment, those are good size assets where we hardly ever bought an office building of that size. And multi-res led it to that, having more ability to say, well, I'm going to redo the lobby or I'm going to try something new. And meanwhile, senior management's not focused on it. But if you're in a bank tower and somebody said, we're going to do something different in the lobby, you're going to get a million phone calls from the tenants. Everyone's going to have an opinion on it. It's crazy. And so that's where asset size and the actual learning of real estate, that's something your company has that's very important. And the one thing we would actually tell people who worked for us is that, and then more in the apartment sector, is that once you learn all this, you can go and leave and do this on your own.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be able to say that to somebody who's managing an office building.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially now.
Especially now. But, with the stuff that you get into is it provides, an interesting thing for, even if you're getting a kid from a wealthy family who you say, well, after you learn here for 10 years, maybe you go do it with your own family and buy them assets and, add value. I think it's a fascinating discussion because it's the truth. It really is.
The only issue is I don't think 10 years is even in the realm of the possibility of someone now to like.
They don't think that far out.
No. Like I say like 2-3 years, and that's already like, wow, that's far into the future.
Yeah, well, I guess the only thing I'd say, and we haven't talked much about it, but seeing cycles and going through cycles is important for anyone managing real estate. Or do you see enough bad deals in a 3 to 5 year time frame to learn? So not that I'm trying to tie anyone up for a length of time, but you know, where do you learn on the bad assets? We used to do postmortems on things that went wrong, right? And that, without any finger pointing or crap like that, we'd say, let's just review an asset and let's see the underwriting. Let's see how well. Oh, we bought it for 100. Your numbers say the numbers say that it's supposed to be worth 120 now. It's worth 105. Hmm. Can we look at the assumptions? What do we do wrong here? Because when they go right, it's like, wow, we were genius. But that's important for whoever you're training to do. And that's the same thing I find, is that they need to see a number of assets. They need to see multiple markets, and it makes them a better business person by doing that. Even like for you to see Washington and see the U.S. markets, you're going to have your antenna up on Montreal that you wouldn't have had your antenna up before. It's has huge value.
Yeah.
Huge value. Yeah.
Um, you touched a point earlier that I thought was really interesting because we were talking about team, and to me, what comes across from our conversation is like you're really like, you're like Joe Sakic, like you're like the leader mode, and you call it sovereign, where it's like a decentralized, let everyone do their thing, and that's how you build a big kingdom.
Yep.
Um, and from your case study of Great West Life for 200 to 17 billion.
Yep.
Like that's a crazy ascent. So you
Yep.
really do need to be decentralized and sovereign mode for it to grow. But how do you handle when there's a mistake? So let me give you an
Yep.
example. You we were talking about deals and you were saying like, well, so let's walk through it. Walk me through your numbers. And that example is something that I encounter all the time.
Yep.
Even if I'm in Toronto right now, we're all connected, and so there's group chats of different channels of the team, different projects. And when something goes wrong, it's it's Tommy's numbers were wrong,
Yeah.
or Cat didn't tell me. Like all of a sudden it's very clear on who didn't do it right,
Yep.
but it's not like, oh, we made a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find that really interesting because everyone's really quick to find like, oh, it's not me, it's someone else.
Yep.
How do you get people to kinda just take collective ownership?
Well, the only way, well, the best way I would try to do it, and I can only think of something that happened to us, is that if you take it on and you as leader own the numbers and you say, these are our numbers, they're not Susan's or Bill's or whatever. These are our numbers. Let's have a look at the numbers and let's deal with the facts and stay out of the emotion. And so when the one example I have that I had to deal with personally was I think I was in Boston at a conference and I got a phone call that there were drawings of the vaults in the Commerce Court that were now with the Toronto Sun. Okay. So the story goes like this. So the story goes that we were reviewing some plans
Mhm.
with different tenants on reconfiguring certain things at CIBC.
Okay.
It wasn't the vault. But I guess the guy had taken the plans and had gone to an ATM machine and leaned them up. Well, they're in one of those tubes, right? Leaned them up against one of the tubes and got some money and forgot the tube. Somebody then decided to take the tube and give it to the Toronto Sun, right? So you can't make this shit up. So now the Toronto Sun's going to publish, and I think they did publish second, it wasn't front page, but it was second page, that these drawings were found. So what we had to do was we had to get a lawyer involved, our corporate counsel, and we had to get private detectives involved. And first off, we had to tell the Sun they couldn't do this. Like that's not fair game. So then it got into reviewing how the drawings got to where they got to. But where I got it from my standpoint was somebody at the bank, CIBC, wanted to see me. And first off, I didn't send anyone. I went. I probably could have sent anyone, but I said, no, this is mine. And I remember the guy just reaming me out. He was the CFO of the bank. He goes, how did this happen? All this stuff. And I said, listen, if you want a head on a stick, I'll get it, but I can't do it right now. I said, we've got a media problem right now, and we need to solve the media problem. I'll go find the culprit, but let's deal with the problem. So I think the more you depersonalize it, you say, we have a problem, or the numbers are wrong, not you're wrong. The numbers don't work. And stay away from you're right and you're wrong. The more you do that, the more it it will go through the company in a more positive way. And one of the things I've started to notice more as I've gotten older is everyone has a desire to be right. And sometimes losing that desire to be right and just saying numbers are numbers, facts are facts. Rather, I can deal with my own friends to go, who was the leading scorer in the NHL last year? And it's almost like this pride in being right. And you go, well, it's just a fact. The fact you remember it correctly and I don't, it's not an issue. Let's find out what the answer is. And if you can take, like I keep thinking, if you just take some of this emotion out and this idea of being right and wrong, the numbers are the numbers. The building is the building. What's it worth? Let's figure it out.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
like but the more you really have to try and, I guess, going back to what I was saying before, when there's a mistake, it's yours, and try to keep it that way. Let's fix it. And and that goes back to my sports days. And you guys would really relate to this. So I played quarterback. So there's a fumble. Do I say to the guy, like, why did you fumble the ball? Like, why would I ever say anything that stupid? I know he didn't want to fumble the ball. So what I would say is the guy get in the huddle and goes, we got to go do something. We need a first down. We need to go. We got to get going. Let's pick it up, and you wouldn't even look at him. Everybody knew. And if somebody in the huddle said something to him, to shut the fuck mouth. Like, he didn't want to fumble the ball. We know he didn't. Let's go. Let's go get it back. And the more you can get into this, to me, the attitude of let's solve problems. And then, I don't know, if you go to any kids' games, you'll see the coach that yells at the kid for dropping, missing the net or whatever. Like that is just so negative. The kid doesn't want to miss the net. And so a lot of this stuff even translates into later on. People, they didn't put the numbers forward to be wrong.
Mhm.
They're doing their best. Now, I think what becomes a challenge is if that same person's wrong 5 times in a row with their numbers,
Yeah.
you might need a new numbers person. But I still like the idea of something's wrong, we have to fix it.
And were you always able to kinda have this outside perspective?
I've been pretty good that way, I think that comes to my sporting days
Okay.
because I would have picked that. Like, I went to a leadership camp, so in Ontario, there was this thing on Lake Couchiching, and when you're going into grade 12, uh, each high school was sending I guess, leader in training type of thing. So it was all sports, but it was all about leadership. And it made me think about being a leader early on. So idea, lead by example, you know, don't say the wrong things. Like there's so many things that you can do as a leader that will allow it. But most importantly, it was lead by example, and being a good quiet leader in some cases was more important than yelling. And so with that, and then I was captain of a lot of teams, and you get the coaches would put pressure. Wouldn't say put pressure. There was expectations, and so I tried to live up. I thought it was an important thing that I was captain. I wanted to lead by example. I wanted to make sure that I was positive. I remember so many times having halftime speeches at football about we got to be better. We are better than this. We need to win these games. Like we're not playing well, and it wasn't. I never did any finger pointing. Finger pointing never worked. And so I think that my athletic career helped me when I got into business and see it the same way, which is, yeah, and people don't want to fuck up, and yeah, you gotta be able to live with whatever's going on, and people don't want to screw up. They really don't.
Between your apprenticeship years in the malls and then fast track to the huge GWL, along the way, is there a failure or a deal that if you do your timeline, you kind of go like, oh, this moment had a game changing effect on the rest?
Well, I'm going to tell you one of the things that really helped my career was I'm at Trizec, and I was hired by this guy, Paul Kennedy, who we became very good friends. And Paul had promoted me from vice president, senior vice president, giving me a raise. And it was all he said, "You're doing a great job." It was one of the few times I wasn't asking for a raise, was not. He just gave it to me because he recognized I was the equivalent of some of his other guys on the team. What happened was the CEO of the Trizec at that time didn't think it was warranted because he had to deal with another guy in corporate that was about my level. So what happened for me was this CEO invited me to his place for breakfast and proceeded to tell me that I was going to be demoted and he was going to take away my salary, and this was all good for me, right? So then he drove me to the airport in Calgary and he let me out of the car. And I was shaking. I mean, this was, I think I'd been promoted for all of a month or whatever, but he waited a while. And I phoned Paul Kennedy, my boss. And Paul said, well, you need to build a shit file. And a shit file is a file where you just start writing down everything they're telling you in case they try and screw you on your severance. And what was important for me on that is I knew I really had somebody that had my back, because he didn't try and defend what happened. He knew it was wrong. And so then that's led us to go to Great West, and which allowed us to continue to grow together as a co-leadership. And, I spent a lot of years working with Paul, and we were a good um, team, co-leadership, I called it. And from that, but that was a point in time where I finally had met somebody who cared about me and was helping me, where other times I had bosses that were just bosses, right? And they didn't care. But Paul was really good. And what I think, and I've heard this more from consultants, is you knew he cared. And that really made a difference in my career, that finally I'd found somebody who cared. And then later on with Great West, the organization cared. Like I got that feeling where, when I think of what happened at the bank, there wasn't somebody who cared. When I went to Tri-Lee, there wasn't somebody who cared. When I went to Trizec, for the most part, than Paul, there was somebody who cared. There were other people who were trying to take you out. And finding somebody who will look out for you and give you good advice, very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. The deal, like for me, deals, I think I learned way more from people than I did from deals. And that's the thing I found is that uh, my the importance of having relationships and natural relationships. I'm not like I didn't network for the sake. I just like people, and so you'd end up connecting with somebody, and then it became a valuable relationship. And I'm also a big believer in having, a small number of really good friends, and I had that in the industry. I had people I was really tight with. So when something went wrong and you asked them the question, they told you. They said, "I'm not going to the press with this, and I'm telling you the truth, and I'll maybe never repeat it, but a little bit like, you got screwed, and here's why we screwed you, and the guy that screwed you, I can't fire him." Stuff like that versus, "Oh, we did that? Oh, that's surprising. I'm really sorry." And that's being,
Fake.
that's being fake.
Yeah, yeah.
But to be able to go and have a number of contacts in the industry that say, here's why you didn't get the deal. I'm telling you the truth, and move on.
Is there like a habit or a thing that you did in particular to keep ties with so many people in the industry?
I'd say you need to be well, open and vulnerable to few. You can't be open and vulnerable to many. You'll take advantage of you. But it was knowing who you could trust and have those deep conversations with, and then just keep it at that, and keep that confidentiality, keep that understanding. Don't play that card all the time. These deep friendships will survive the business, and other friendships are just business relationships. But I would, it was, if you wanted the straight stuff from me, I'd tell you the straight stuff. But that was only for a few. And it was important that you, because otherwise, like, I didn't like giving the party line, but sometimes you knew it wasn't, was the wrong person, right? It's the wrong person to be having a conversation with about what the hell's going on. They're, yeah, they're not trustworthy. They're not, yeah, they're not, it's not worth it.
Okay. Okay. If you had to restart the rise that you had at Great West and it's like a crazy ascent, what would you do differently? With knowing what you know now and kind of looking back?
Would I do anything differently? No, I'm pretty happy. I don't like having regrets. I don't think of life that way. I don't think it's worthwhile.
But not necessarily
But
regrets. I'm saying like you have these like best practices and I'm coming here and I'm going, okay, yeah, sovereign is a good thing and you gotta, like let people run and then trust and then check over it and make sure it's okay. And then kind of that's how you're able to do more. That's kind of like my
yeah, yeah.
parting Finkbeiner theory and case study is that. And I'm going, okay, well, so maybe he learned that progressively over time and knowing what he knows now, if he goes back into the body of the 30-year-old kind of going in the starter seat, what would he do different? Like, how would he?
So the thing that I'd say is that I was given the global role after years of wanting it, and it didn't last as long as I wanted to. And the reason it got interrupted was COVID. So we had, so my aspirations, so once I grew Canada, I wanted to grow and do a global thing. And they gave me I became head of global real estate. And at that time, we had bought 2 US companies and merged them together. We had this platform in the UK, which was about 5 billion in AUM, and we had another one in Ireland. And I was appointed to be the head of global. And what that got all short-circuited because of COVID, because we were about to buy um, another platform in the UK, and I thought this was gonna be a great thing. But that all got changed when COVID hit, and then also Great West Life had a change in plans, is that it they didn't wanna go global, and so I wanted to do that. One of the things that I've reflected on, though, after the fact, is whether real estate's really a global business or not. And we we always talk about it being local. And so the thing that I've now observed is that was it the right thing to do? Because even when I was in the chair, I thought we'd be able to move money, Canadian money to the UK money, and that really didn't happen. And I think you're also seeing that with other global platforms. They are, yes, there'll be some best practices that happen up here, but they're kind of standalone businesses. And that's when I reflect on like salary structures in the UK, US, and Canada are all different. The way the country sets up is all different. Like even um, you get into Canada and everyone wants to be an asset manager and property manager. When you go to the UK, no one does property management. So my thing is, first, I would have liked to had a chance to really grow out that global platform. And the only second thing, my reflection is, I don't know whether it was going to work anyway. Right. Like that's really what I'm kind of coming to grips with is that it, because everyone was doing it at the time. And now that they've been there for a number of years, you got to ask the ones that are global, what's the right model to be global? And the right model to be global might be as an operator in some markets and an allocator in others, where you don't build big teams, but you go and say, and this is where my reflection is that some of the things that 10 years ago, some things that didn't exist were that Blackstone, Brookfield, and a whole bunch of these guys have tons of funds in the UK, the US, wherever. So 10, 15 years ago was like, I don't think they existed. So if you're a Canadian platform, you say, I want to buy in the UK. Well, I gotta buy some buildings and I gotta put some people in there. Same thing in the US. Now you could sit there and go, oh, I can buy buildings, or there's 15 funds that I could invest in. Maybe I should be doing it that way. And so that's partly me seeing a change in the real estate industry as well. And yeah, that's kind of where I come from on that.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
That's like I guess, like you said, capital allocation, and you're looking at, in the end, the best means to get the return with, like, capping your downside risk. And I guess if somebody already has the vehicle and the expertise embedded in the vehicle, why not go through them?
Correct.
That's a very non-real estate view, because I feel like in real estate, the view is a lot of ego, and it's a lot of like, "We can do it ourselves. We'll
Yes.
we'll do it better."
Yes. And this is the thing that what I started to reflect on later on with the number of funds that have been created going. And by the way, here's the, let me pitch to you as a client
Mhm.
why I can still do that for you,
Okay.
but as an allocator, not as an operator. So I'd say, okay, I'm a real estate guy who ran a platform. I know property management. I know asset management. I know the ins and outs. So now you want to go and hire a fund someplace to do that for you. Could you let me be part of the interview process? Because I know how the real estate works from the ground up.
Mhm.
So you still may need me to ride shotgun over what you do. Maybe for once, let's pick the 5 funds we're going to be in. Let me sit on them for 3 years, then move on. But don't go in there blind. And so the thing that I would say is that's where you become kind of a advisor to the allocator and you're still helpful.
So
And that
you're talking to me, I'm the pension plan,
you're the pension plan.
and you're the fund of funds? Like, you're
Right now, I'm your advisor, and
okay,
I did everything for you in Canada.
okay,
I did some stuff for you in the US. We built out platforms. Now you say I want to go into Australia.
okay.
What I would say to you is that fine, but you got to try and find me in Australia because we've had a great relationship.
Yeah,
Don't you think I might be helpful to help you find the right team in Australia and just be there with you?
yeah,
And I'm not like, yes, I want to get a fee here,
mhm,
but I also want to add value. And I
yeah,
think I can add value when somebody's telling you they do property management And you go, well, did you check them out? Did you check out did you interview the people? Could you tell that they knew what they were talking about or not? And so that's where I find that this is where the idea of being an allocator, the more you know how to be an operator, it makes you a better allocator, right? And so the thing that we would get into with this is where I could always say to capital that being an operator is the best thing because you then really understand the asset. So if you just be, if all you are is a big amount of capital and you want to allocate, you still need educated people. Like then it becomes your interview process on what you do. And then this goes a little bit to what we were talking about in a way. Are you then just going to pick all the Blackstone funds?
Yeah.
Or do you then go and say, I'm going to pick 3 Blackstone funds, a couple of these, because I think it gives you a better lens into the investment world. You see different styles. And that's when you start thinking about it, it's kind of how equity managers or people who manage equities go, I want certain styles in my offerings. And this is where real estate has the ability to do something different than it used to be, which is maybe there can be funds that are made up of direct real estate, publicly traded real estate, and private funds, private assets. But in order for somebody to play in that, they really have to be a good operator and understand the direct real estate first. Because if you told me, um, I'm going to take a guy who knows how to do REITs and I'm going to get him to buy assets, I'd go, I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah.
And so this is where uh, I think it's important that somebody came up through that. And then the more that once they if you understand the direct real estate, you're going to understand the REIT and you're going to understand some of these other funds. But if you don't understand direct real estate, because that's where, to me, allocators just lose money because they go, well, I, I did all the research, Austin industrial, it works well. So they go into Austin, the building's a piece of crap. They didn't check out the roofs. They didn't do this. They didn't do that, and got a bad asset. And they went maybe in the wrong part of Houston. But the more you understand the nuts and bolts, I think the better real estate person you are, and then you can do anything you want. You can be an allocator. You can be an operator, or whatever you choose to do.
So the summary that I hear is get more exposure by doing smaller deal size because then you can actually influence and learn from it, and then work your way up. Because the opposite, being an analyst on a huge, I don't know, the real estate of CN, let's
Yes.
say, and looking down, you have no idea that,
Yeah. You can still play up there.
yeah,
I just think you're better if you do what we just said, what you just said. So,
yeah.
you know, work real hard assets, like, and this the where you have more say in them. Like one of the things when I was at Brookfield, like I said, I was at Brookfield before it was cool. We were in a workout with the help of the different people in the organization. We valued every asset, and I had to go through all the numbers on every asset, whether it was a housing development in Santa Ana, whether it was there was there was an office building in Santa Ana that had underground parking, and everyone went, "Well, why does it have underground parking? There's land around here like crazy." And then the numbers weren't working out. But in order to when you work a lot of assets, and particularly when assets are in trouble, you learn a lot more. Like I think I felt my 2 years at Brookfield were worth 10 because we were under a lot of pressure. We valued a lot of assets. We had to know exactly what those assets were worth. We had to know the ins and outs of them. And you really had to work hard. I couldn't rely on anyone else. I had to know myself. And so the more you dig into it and really know your numbers, and even it becomes, can you can you really make a spreadsheet dance, or can you make Argus or any of the news? Can you really know what how they work? And the one example I have on that is when I was at Brookfield, we had an empty building. It was, 1,000 de la Gauchetière was maybe 33% leased at this point instead of 67. I think SNC Lavalin left. And one of the guys came to me and said, we asked the Montreal office to value the asset. They said it's going to take a day. How long would it take, Paul? I said, give me half an hour. But I knew how to run, at this time, the software was called Project. And what I did was, instead of, when you lease up buildings, I could make it very simple. Let's say this is a 600,000 square foot building, third's already pre-leased. So I got the rents in. So then I'm going to lease up the rest in 2 blocks. One in the year at this average rent, and the other one the next year at this average rent. I'm going to run the numbers. And I'm going to make an assumption that from a recovery on the office standpoint is it's going to recover whatever the occupancy level was. I ran it. Somebody else would have leased that building up 10,000 square feet every month for whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it, and I'm going to be close, right, on my modeling. And I would be able to figure things out like that because I knew how the model worked. And the same thing would go, and you've probably never worked in the office market per se, but when you run these models, they say, okay, we got to figure out what tenant inducements go with a lease. And they go, well, we got to assume what percent of the leases renew versus go to market. Well, basically, the model's doing this. The model's saying whatever number you put in for, like, so if it's renewed, you're going to put in 0 TI. If it's new, you're going to put in 50. If you do it 50, the average TI is $25.
Yeah.
So I can make the assumption that 100% of the tenants renew at $25 and get you the same model.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe how many times people would argue with me about what percent of the tenants are going to renew. I go, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I just need to have the right TI in. Tell me 90, tell me 70. I don't care. All we're trying to do is apply a number against it. And that becomes where you know the model. And some of this stuff is a little bit like knowing your numbers and how they work. It's a little bit, sometimes you go, why would somebody take a cash flow and grow the NOI at 3% and discount it back at 10? I think I can do the math. So why not just take year 1 cap rate? We're good.
Yeah.
Sometimes the math doesn't work, because in order to make the math work and for an NPV to work, you also have to get into having rent increases that might be greater than the discount rate you're bringing them back. Again, a lot of this stuff becomes, for me, a lot of it was common sense, but you don't know how many people I would run into and they go, well, the model says this. And you go, well, does it make any sense to you?
That reminds me of the first, during COVID, at one point, nobody's coming back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very lonely because I was renting a space and nobody was coming in. And Bill had a space downtown in Montreal. And he told me, you can come work out of here.
Yeah.
So I could hear, him on his calls and stuff. And at the end of the day, I talked to him about whatever project I was working on. And it really kind of fascinated me because Bill was never using a calculator.
Yep.
Was only napkin math and really, really high level, like 10,000 feet in the air.
Yep.
But like extremely precise and coming within a few degrees of whatever, we had spent all day putting into the model.
Yeah.
And having those conversations of like really high level the deal and kind of, the main levers making it better or worse. I found that that is a better use of my time and was a better training than all the hours that we spent in the model, because when you're spending it in the model, you're dissecting it
Yeah.
to such a small degree that you kind of lose the essence of, high level. What's the case study here and how can it change, and explain it to me.
Yeah.
But you need to explain it to me without showing me anything, because that's the way he was, interacting.
Well, and what I found is that, like, I would listen to people tell me what the value of an asset was, right? With all exactness that was crazy, and you go, "Well, let me think of how many assumptions you put in." So, number 1, you've got a rental assumption for 10 years. You've got, expense, increases for 10 years. Like, you've put a lot of stuff in here that is best guess stuff. But you're talking to me like this is an exact number, that the building is worth exactly $103 million. And I go, "Let me run the numbers. I'll make it 120. I'll make it 150 if you want, like, whatever you want." Like, and that's where, this, from figures never lie, but liars sometimes figure. You can make the numbers do what you want. And so the part that you were trying to really get into is what was the real value of the building. And I'm a, like, the thing that you get into is that just capping year one income, or maybe year two income, because you got to build it out, is the nicest, simplest way to do it. And by the way, then we can actually get into a debate, and you watch how fast that thing changes if cap rates change.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other stuff just didn't matter to me. I mean, when I listen to people talk about terminal cap rates versus existing cap rates, like, yes, I can do it, but I would lose my mind. I just wanted to be a year one cap guy. I found it so much easier, and I also didn't think. And this comes from, like, from an engineering standpoint. If we calculated the strength of concrete, we had tested the concrete and we knew what the strength was of concrete. But I can't, like, this is where, real estate appraisal is an art and a science. And then you get into, so what does it sell for? And this is still kind of the one of the most interesting things about real estate being an illiquid asset class, that we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what it's worth. And we have to. Don't get me wrong, we have to. But sometimes you don't know. You really don't. And so therefore, can you take it to market and find out what it's gonna sell for? It was a little bit like we talked about very early on. You've got a building you think you can sell for more? Take it out, and it's gonna be lesser than your expectations. Take it out another time, it's gonna be greater than your expectations. But what does it actually provide you? It provides you a cash flow. Do you take comfort in that cash flow being fairly stable or not? That might be what's way more important, because this is what, we used to say to people about real estate, for, pension funds. This is a great asset class to go buy groceries for your grandmother, to be able to continue to buy her better groceries, because likely rents are going up. In particular in the office, if I got a step rent, that means I can buy her groceries this year, maybe nicer groceries next year, nicer groceries next year. That's what it is. It's a bond with an equity kicker is what real estate is. And when you stop then getting into the valuation of it, you say, do you like that cash flow? Does that return on that cash flow give you comfort? And if that gives you comfort going up, that's how it fits in. Because in the pension fund world, in their world of investing, it was roughly, out of, the billions of dollars they have, they're going to put 10 to 15% in real estate. And what do they want it to behave like? A bond with an equity kicker. It's negatively correlated to stocks and bonds and is a hedge against inflation.
Mhm.
So real estate people like to talk about how sexy the real estate is, how much it's going up in value. And I keep saying to them, it's a strategic asset for pension funds because it's a hedge against inflation. It's not correlated to stocks and bonds. Wow. Wow. And that was something early on in my career I just had to tell people, is that people are giving us money to buy good, solid assets for. We don't need to knock it out of the park. We just need to make sure that they behave like I just said.
Mhm.
It's a bond with an equity kicker, and we're not buying empty buildings. We don't need to buy empty buildings. We need to provide them cash flow. And that's I think the thing I've come to realize that um, for a diversified portfolio, having real estate in it is a great thing. Um, and it, it only needs to behave more like core real estate. It doesn't need to behave like value add or opportunistic. It doesn't need to. And the only ones who get into that are the bigger plans. The bigger plans go, I've got core real estate, or I'm going to use infrastructure to look like core real estate. And then on my real estate, I want to do a little bit higher stuff. I'm going to do opportunistic and value add. But we made the real estate world very complicated by having all these alternatives within the alternative, right? It's just real estate.
Well, I mean, it's just riskier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So naturally, I'm more attracted to value add because I'm in the growth stage of my
But it
practice.
takes more. I feel that that part of the business is more risk and takes more talent. Some of the stuff that we're talking about, you need to look at good locations and buy good locations, and you can deliver what I said.
Yeah, yeah,
But for what you do, that again goes more in the private equity bucket, different real estate bucket. So
yeah,
you then, instead of really saying, I don't think you're competing against real estate per se to get the money, you're competing against private equity,
yeah,
which it's a different compete.
yeah,
And then you got to know, and by the way, what you're doing, even when, and if you were pitching a private equity guy, I'd say, you're a better story than private equity because I think private equity guys at a high return can go to zero. Even when you buy a shitty building that you're going to fix up, I think it's highly unlikely it goes to zero.
no, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the proof is there's a senior lender who was able to underwrite it and was strictly looking at that asset and how bad it could go. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, yeah.
and then maybe the credit of that lender isn't great, but usually this is like the most prudent of all the credit departments.
But
And
it's still a
yeah,
hard asset. Like that's what I love about real estate. It's still a hard asset. And yet, if it can be a hard asset and give you private equity returns, your downside's way more protected versus somebody who's got a startup tech company
yeah,
who says, give me $100 million, and they go, oh, the app didn't work. Oh, we don't get into that with real estate. That's what's beautiful about it. Like that. Um, and so, but as you compete, you just, like I always want to know, uh, when I think of somebody's capital that they're going to invest, in order to understand them, you need to know what each bucket's doing. So even for any investor, you go, well, you got a bunch of your RSPs in stocks, but by the way, most of those people will not have any hard income producing real estate because a REIT is an equity. It's not hard assets. And those things are hard to get, but if you can get them in your portfolio, it's what all the big pension funds do, right? All the big pension funds have this allocation to direct real estate, and it can now be in the form of a fund or it can be in the actual building, but they all have it and they all love it. I mean, it makes up a compete of that alternative asset class. Now, alternative asset class now is expanded to about 50% of their holdings. So in that 50% is certain amount of real estate, certain amount of infrastructure, certain amount of private equity.
yeah.
When I started, it was just real estate mainly in that bucket. There
Okay.
wasn't much infrastructure and there wasn't much private equity. Now it's changed. So it's a different compete. Before we competed against stocks and bonds to get allocation. Now real estate competes against stocks, bonds, plus in its own category, private equity and infrastructure.
Yeah, I feel like now there's just so much more options and it's way more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Um, And that's also, I can't even speak on it, but I had people explain me how much more investment vehicles there is in the US versus in Canada with debt and just kinda going into, real estate, like, title companies and all that. I It's like a humbling experience. I feel like the more I learn, the more I realize that I still don't know everything.
Yeah.
And I'm learning every day, and it's just like this big world of like what you're telling me. Basically, you're basically in the capital world, and real estate is a proponent of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Small, like, the weird thing about real estate from that standpoint is when I would go see pension fund clients, it would represent 10 to 15% of their book. But what would happen is that CEO wanted to talk about real estate. Why? It was more interesting. Like, it's more interesting talking about real estate than it is stocks and bonds. I mean, I can tell you that much. And it's real. Like that's the one thing people like about it is you look at an office building, they'll go, I was in your elevator and I really I, I didn't like the color of the buttons. Or it jerked me up and down and I thought I was going to be sick. Or I was in your mall and I don't understand why you put that store there. That's real estate.
Yeah, everyone has an opinion. Yeah.
But no one goes, maybe they have some comment about a stock, like, why did you buy Apple?
No, nobody goes to the Tesla factory and goes like, "Hey, your lobby
No,
not in the right location."
no, and that's the thing that it was this idea of understanding wealth became important for me is that as a asset class, I need to know how to compete, but I also need to know more about the client. And that's where this is where, to me, in kind of starting out as a real estate guy and then getting to be better at what I did was the more I could understand other asset classes than that I was competing against, and rather than sticking my head in the sand and say, well, I just know real estate, I wanted to understand how they pitched it. So, why would they go into this? And then you also kind of got to a point where once you convinced them to give you that percentage, it was a beautiful thing. And here's what would happen, so the equity markets go way up. And so if I said I had 15% in real estate and we didn't buy anything, my weighting's now at 10.
Yeah, you can
So
increase.
I get to go buy 5 more if they stick with the same allocations. But by the same token, equities go down and my 15 becomes 20. And they said, my hurdle is, I said 15 was my max. Go sell. And so this is the beauty of being an asset allocation, uh, pros and cons,
Mhm.
right? And yet I just found it more interesting to understand how the person at the top is allocating capital and what their issues are. And rather than just being in there, being the real estate guy pitching, you got to buy this building, you got to buy this building. The more I knew what was going on with the rest of the portfolio, the more educated I was to say, oh, you just bought a bunch of Royal Bank bonds, and I'm trying to get you to buy 5 Royal Bank buildings. Why would you do that? And so that makes always made me want to be a smarter investment person versus just a real estate person. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed listening to what the pitches are. And then when you were talking, one thing that occurred to me, as you start to look at all these other vehicles, the possibility of investing in them, you should be able to underrate them fairly well with your real estate knowledge. And if
Mhm.
you can't understand them, then it doesn't make sense to invest in them, right?
Mhm.
And that's where you get into things with, if you can't, if there's a disconnect between what the value of the building is and the value of the buildings is and the value of the fund, you got to go, something's up here.
Yeah.
And that's where you get back into the just nuts and bolts of real estate. And that's what's really fun about looking at things. I mean, that's where I would, I would dig into different REITs and try and figure out why are they getting these values for their buildings? It doesn't make sense. And that's a capital markets view on value. But it made me more educated on what we were doing.
Sounds to me though like REITs are between a rock and a hard place because when it's bad times, they don't want to raise because their trust units are worth so little.
Yeah.
So they have to dispose of assets that are worthwhile, but probably disposing of them in a fire sale. Like I don't get how long term a REIT is a great vehicle. Like
I don't know. So the weird part about a REIT, I call it, even though it's called a trust, is I don't trust you. The reason I don't trust you is I want you to pay out 90 or 95% of your cash flow. I
yeah.
don't trust you. Really, that's what it's saying. Because when we had looked at it at one point, we were going to do one, and we wanted to do like a 60 or 50% distribution. That wouldn't fly in the REIT world. Because to me, what you want to be able to do if you have good real estate is reinvest in it. And what you point out is that if you're paying out that much of your distributable income, how can you reinvest? And then what you're forced to do is you're almost forced to say, I can't invest any money in this building. I got to sell it. And then you might be selling off a building that somebody's going to take, invest money into it and get a pop. But it became, it's more of a cash flow vehicle, but then also goes up and down um, with the market, not the true real estate value. And that's the thing that I just think that people who, and I remember Bill did this. I'm pretty sure Tresham took advantage of it at one point personally, where he looked at how the REITs were trading. He looked at what the real estate was worth and said, I'm going to make a play. And I think that has a ton of value. I mean, I try to do that myself with some of the REITs, but more in the US because they're a bit more interesting. But same thing is that as a real estate person, you should be able to know what's going on in the difference in the markets. And
Mhm.
so you make a play and say, it's undervalued. Now you can be right or wrong because again, it's going to go. It's not like the direct real estate. When you make a play and you go to fix it up, you're pretty sure it's going to go up in value. When you buy one of these, you buy one of these stocks or REITs that looks undervalued, and then you go, oh shit. Some certain news came out about rent controls, or I didn't see that coming, and it went down
Yeah.
again. How do you control? How
Yeah.
do you control?
Is there a oh, okay. Is there an asset class or asset class too big? What do you find exciting in real estate right now? Is there any trend or any opportunity that you look at and you kind of go, this is interesting?
It's sort of what we're touching on a little bit is I think there is an ability now to arbitrage between the REITs, different funds, and direct real estate. I think there's also an ability to invest in some pretty good global stuff. So Blackstone probably has good funds. Brookfield has good funds. Whether those funds get into the public realm, I think they're trying to do that because both Brookfield and Blackstone, BlackRock are all trying to get the average guy into some of that asset class. The one thing that I find intriguing about the real estate market is whether there's a play on the property management, of whether there's an ability to acquire a bunch of property managers. A friend of it's called an opco to propco strategy. And I think that that is fascinating and it might allow somebody to get scale because getting scale in Canada is already locked up by most of the pension funds. And so it's not, there's very few places left to play, but I do feel that property management been underutilized, there's not the good service there. I think there's an opportunity there. All the rest of the stuff, um, it's just kind of, I find more excitement about the U.S. market and things that are going on there than the Canadian market.
And what in the US market do you
It's just that there's so many cities. Like, we had looked at, I think there were 35 cities over 1 million people. So just as an investor, and as anyone who's looking at research, there's more work to be done and understand markets, and that just makes it more interesting for me. Like, after a while, I started to say that, because we got into, let's understand the Canadian market. We'd invested in every Canadian city. We thought that was great diversification. Then we started to get into more research based stuff, which was, where are the tenants and what industries are those tenants in, and what are the drivers of those markets? And it kind of came out that the two best markets were Toronto and Vancouver, and then Montreal. Why? Because there were multiple drivers of those markets. Certain other Canadian markets, government. Ottawa, government. Uh, Edmonton, government. Calgary, oil and gas. So you kind of went, well, I need a diversified portfolio. Where do I invest? Toronto.
Mhm.
Get me an office building in Toronto. It's got high-tech tenants, got financial services, or Vancouver. I might have, Pacific Rim connections, And so suddenly it went, me thinking that the way to diversify was to be in all these Canadian cities. And it said, well, maybe you'll need to be in one Canadian city because it's got a diversified economy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Food for thought.
Yeah, yeah.
You probably don't want to do what I just said, but I would then narrow down your markets. And similarly, when you go to the US, figure out what you're trying to get exposure to and pick the market you want to be exposed to. But that was pretty interesting because we thought we were being so clever to be in all these cities. We had charts, and we also were doing it by, initially we were doing it by province, and then it was, well, just do it by city, because we didn't really, after a while, we weren't necessarily in Manitoba. You're not Prince Edward Island. There's a bunch of markets you're not in. Why? Because when you looked at the size of the cities, like Canada's only got a few cities that are over 1 million square feet or a million population, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, throughout this, talk, you spoke in past tense a lot, but, sounds like you still have a lot of energy and you're very passionate. What's the next step? Like,
Oh,
what's
I'm on a number of private company boards, and there, what I get a lot of joy out of is actually doing stuff like this.
Yeah,
I'm looking into possibly doing some mentoring as well, where, maybe working with leaders in different, in real estate or in different industries. But I just find that right now I'm comfortable with my dabbling on a few things. I'm uh, still want to stay true to my beliefs, which is, if a friend calls me and wants some help, I'm there, and it needs to be fun. So those are kind of my guiding lights lately. It's really about, um, trying to do things with people I like, largely in real estate, but where it's going to be fun, and ideally where you could be aligned, where you say, if your company does well, you do well, and I do well. Those are the things that I'm looking for. And, I ended up, having just, some great conversations with old colleagues, like a friend. We met in, Vancouver and talked about our old Brookfield days. And it was really nice to reconnect. But those are genuine relationships that in some cases I didn't really realize that they were there. But, for me, what has been refreshing is just that the people you touched and the people you were kind to throughout the piece, there's kindness coming back,
yeah.
and that's really nice.
Perfect. Thanks so much for coming.